Okay, I'll call this Plan Commission meeting for July 9th, 2018 to order. Roll call, please.
Bruce Zellner.
Here.
Sue Springman. Joe Zitzelberger.
Here.
Pat McGowan.
Here.
Brian Malish. Tim Black.
Here.
Chris Thomas.
Here.
Okay, first item is minutes. Anybody like anything pulled or look for a motion?
I move approval.
Motion by Pat McGowan, second by Chris Thomas. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Any public comments on any items that are not on the agenda for this evening? Then just, Linda, just state your name, address, and go ahead.
Linda Ashmore, 114 South Street. I just wanted to publicly thank the Plan Commission for voting to not rezone the houses on West Second Street. It was something that our neighborhood really wanted to keep it residential, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Old business, discuss and take action on a conditional use permit to install additional wall signage at 1004 Quinn Drive. Kevin? Are you doing this one?
Yep, I'll do it. Certainly, we had a public hearing at the last meeting. Certainly, there was consensus from the Plan Commission to approve it. You asked us to formalize the approval process, which Brian has done with consultation with me. So starting on page 8 of 102 is the document for your approval. If it's acceptable to you, then it would just be an approval to approve the conditional use permit as drafted.
Any comments, questions from the plan commissioners? I think everything is appropriate for what we asked for.
I think there was a note someplace in here, it was on the MSA memo, about not exceeding 150 square feet. I assume if we're specifying the number of signs, that becomes kind of a moot point.
Not necessarily.
What page, Joe?
Be page 11 of
Oh, it's Jason's memo.
Yeah, it's in Jason's memo, so
Right at the
I
very
don't
end.
think we certainly use his comments to draft it, but I don't think we necessarily use the 150.
No, so I mean, if you look at the page 8 of 102, pages 8 and 9, so when we talk about what's being approved, we took language directly from their application. So it talked about placement of 6 outdoor laminated digital vinyl stickers on 6 of the 37 windows. That's directly from the application, so that's what we're allowing. And then what we've done is the conditions are 2A through C. And so, you know, the conditions are basically you're gonna put, the applicant will put the stickers in the windows, in the same windows as identified in the application. They're gonna be of the kind, character, and size as is in the application. And then the one other thing that we have is that when you look at the total site signage that is permitted,
Yep.
it still has to be under the allowable limit. And so I think we probably got the majority, or at least the spirit of Jason's comments incorporated into the 3 conditions that we identified in the CUP.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the conditional use permit for signage at 1004 Quinn Drive as presented.
Motion by Joe Zitzelberger,
Second.
second by Tim Black. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, Wes. New business, discuss and take action on site plan facade improvements, Associated Bank Family Dollar, 269 South Century Avenue.
I don't know if there's anybody here that wants to go. Good.
My name's Aaron Cleese. I'm with TJK Design Build, and I can answer any questions that you may have on the proposed facade update.
Could you want to introduce it?
I also have a packet that may have some additional information that was not in the electronic packet.
Yeah, while he's handing those out, I can give you a little bit of background. We certainly are supportive of the upgrade to the facade. I mean, it's a great improvement to that proposed facade.
If you don't mind. if
I
you
guess
could
the
just-
only concern that
so
we
they can
had
circulate it
too
out
was that the sidewalk's gonna be extended a little bit farther, but we've determined that it will not impede traffic, and so that in terms of circulation should not be an issue. The only thing that I think Ed pointed out, and certainly Ed can talk to more about it if you're interested, is that, you know, the existing signage likely exceeds what would be allowed now. So what we're suggesting as approval is that they can go up to the existing signage. Not that you make them comply with the new requirement, because you do have that authority to make exceptions in signage, but they do not exceed in terms of square footage than what they have right now. Yeah, you can look out over my back and see it. All of them.
So is Associated Bank sign gonna be the same sign?
Yes.
So the other ones are probably gonna be similar in size to that one, is
Correct.
that correct, to the
Right,
Family
and
Dollar
the
ones?
Associated Bank sign is roughly 48 square feet right now.
Okay. So it would actually match better? with
Yes.
What we're looking over there. Okay,
There's 3 proposed signs, right?
Correct.
It's much better.
And you can see on the site plan that we've addressed the sidewalk issue with the 2 ramps adjacent to the areas that currently are striped for handicap parking. In addition to offering some planters in the front to try to green up the front of the building a little bit.
On those ramps, are they gonna have the texture?
Yes.
Okay.
The planters are those 2 little cross-looking thingies on either side?
No, actually, the planters don't show up in there. They're the longer rectangular boxes that mimic the shape of the windows.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, that sheet's been updated.
Okay,
That-
yeah,
I
no
just
problem,
found it.
no problem, okay.
Yeah, that's existing. Exactly. Save the existing square footage. Right, yeah, that was my comment.
Kevin, can you see that? He needs the big one, the update one.
The update.
When are you thinking of starting it?
I believe August 1st.
any other questions? I see it as improvement. No other que-
I can sit here in the meeting and look at it and new improvements. I move approval of the proposed facade improvements as presented with the addition of ramps as noted in the Strand email.
Okay, motion by Pat McGowan,
Second?
second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got a public hearing discussed in action on an amendment to the general development plan for the Waunakee Business Park Phase 2 to allow specific outdoor uses by conditional use permit.
Yeah, as an introduction, this is, certainly there seemed like there was support from the planning commission to allow that particular business with some limitations on screening and where the actual outdoor dog activities could be. So Brian has drafted this amendment to the GDP to allow for it. And I guess the one issue is it's pretty narrow in terms of where these uses can be allowed.
Yeah, so if you look at, so this is a recommendation that you would make to the village board. And so it's, the staff memo's on page 27, pages 28 and 29 of your packet are just the ordinance amendment. And there's really no substantive language in there because the substantive language is in what is attached to the ordinance. And that is Exhibit A, which is the development regulations related to the business park. And so I'm on page 30 of the packet right now. If you look at section B2, that's where we've modified some language, and there's some cleanup language within that paragraph, but really the key language is, except as provided in section 1.7, the general rule is going to apply. And the general rule is you can't operate your businesses outside. The exception is in section 1.7. So if you go to page 33 of your packet, That's the red line changes that is section 1.7. And so it'd be subject to the terms and conditions of the conditional use permit. A daycare center for dogs operating on lot 15 of Waunakee Business Park 2 is allowed to have an outdoor play area for dogs. The conditional use permit shall, among other things, the conditional use permit shall, among other terms and conditions, require the outdoor play area to be properly screened. So we still, if this language is acceptable to you, when we get to the conditional use permit phase, because they have to get a CUP to operate, additional standards or conditions can be identified within the CUP, and the thought process is that's probably the more appropriate place to have it. Now, if you go back on page 32 of your packet, right at the top, section G4, that's the language that we added before to allow a daycare center for dogs, including kenneling or veterinary care associated with the daycare center. We added that language to allow that as a conditional use. My understanding is that there's going to be 3 separate businesses that would be operated on this property if they're allowed to go forward. And so it's not all one, it's 3. Somebody's going to operate a daycare, somebody's going to operate a vet clinic, and somebody either now or in the future may operate a kennel. One of the requests that has been made on the new language on page 33 is not just to refer to a daycare center for dogs, but also to make clear that if you have kenneling or veterinary care, that they can operate outside. Now, you can certainly do that. I mean, and you would still have the ability as part of the CUP process to, for example, identify when the dogs can be outside. Because if you have one thing to think about is if you have a daycare center, they probably operate from, let's say, 7 a.m. to 6. If you have overnight boarding, then you could get into issues of how late are the dogs going to be outside. But even if you added that language in here, which we can certainly do, you would still have the ability to deal with when people can operate outside as part of the CUP, and you can set hours. And so I think that's the one request that the applicant made is to change the language in that section I-7 to include allowing a veterinary clinic or a kenneling to operate outside too. And I think we just wanted feedback from the Plan Commission on that before we made a change. And if you are okay with that, then you could approve, make the recommendation to the village board to approve the ordinance, and we can add that language in there before the ordinance goes to the village board.
Can I add something?
We can answer.
Actually, I'm gonna actually open up for
Yep.
public hearing in just a minute, so we get this first and then we'll go
No problem.
to comments. Okay, anything else from staff? Okay, then I'm gonna open up the public hearing for anybody who'd like to address. So for a public hearing, you have 3 minutes to talk. And in that 3 minutes, please make sure you say your name and where you live and all that kind of stuff.
I'm Jenna Rutkowski. I'm with St. Somewhere, the buying entity. And we just wanted to show you that we have support from MLG, saying that they support the business for, it's an email.
Didn't they qualify their support though in terms of where the outdoor storage or outdoor activities would be?
No. They didn't say it specifically, but they know that it's a daycare and a boarding facility.
I
And
think
then
that,
they have the last page is
Thank
the layout, and they support the layout also.
I think that was the biggest hurdle, was the layout. So the way it was situated on the lot, in accordance to the adjoining lot on the right-hand side, the corner lot, they wanted to make sure that the vision from that lot was not a bunch of dogs outside. So they made those changes.
And I think they also got support from a number of the neighboring property owners.
We did. We got from all of the adjoiners, or butters rather. We did get support from them. And you should have letters, copies of those letters. If you don't, I have them, so at least 2 of them, and I know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else that would like to address? Going once, twice? Okay, then I'm gonna close the public hearing. My only comment, Brian, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
You
just
already
to be
hands up?
clear,
Sure.
if whatever recommendation that you make, this is gonna go to the village board. If this is approved, the applicants are, the prior, whoever's gonna be operating the businesses still has to come back to the village plan commission to actually get the conditional use permit. If whatever action you're taking tonight, you are not approving anything moving forward. You're just basically taking another step that could ultimately allow this to potentially happen.
That answers my question that I was just gonna ask, though.
And certainly my comment would be in 1-1.7 to make the language consistent in terms of including kenneling and vet clinic along with daycare facility for dogs. That seems to make sense. I think it should probably be in both spots. And is that the only change, Brian, in the language that has been suggested by the applicant?
That, as far as I was aware, yes.
Okay.
This is different from this. That's what they did.
Yeah, we're looking to make a motion.
So I think, if everyone's in agreement with Pat, then I think that, you'd have a motion to recommend approval of the amendment to the general development plan with the addition of allowing kenneling and a vet clinic to operate outside pursuant to the CUP process.
Got it, Tracy?
Did you get that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you wanna record that?
I think Tracy got it.
Did you get that?
Tracy?
I'll make that motion.
Sure.
Okay.
I'd
Motion
second.
by Tim, second by Pat McGowan. Okay, call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discussion action on ETJ CSM ESER 6600 Copper Road, Town of Springfield. Kevin?
Yeah, I don't see any village issues in terms of this ETJ. We don't have our boundary agreement with them is actually expired, but we have a good working relationship with them. I think it's far enough out. It's not an area that we're overly concerned with in terms of impeding growth or anything along that lines. We generally just say we don't object, subject to any conditions that the town adds on.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Kevin, is this a land division to create another lot? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, they're just creating one additional lot, probably breaking out the house. There wasn't an explanation with it, but to me, it looks like they're just breaking out the house from the farm property, which most of them have been doing these for estate planning purposes.
In Springfield hasn't taken the line that Westport has with us in terms of saying, hey, when they do something like this, it locks up the rest of the property from further
They
split.
typically do not do
Okay,
that.
great. And I agree completely that it's their business and not necessarily ours.
So are we looking for a specific motion on this? Or what do we need to do, Kevin?
It's a recommended approval to the village board, subject to any conditions from the town of Springfield.
Okay,
So moved.
motion by Pat McGowan,
Second?
second by Joe Zilberger. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got conceptual discussion, annexation of, I think it's Mueller. Am I saying it right?
I think it's Mueller to
Mueller.
Miller and
Miller,
And-
yeah.
Miller?
Mueller.
Miller. And school district properties, Woodland Drive, Town of Westport.
Yeah, Tracy, that's a great map that you have out there. On the left-hand side of the property, you can just use your pointer there.
I don't have a pointer.
Well, I think it'll just, it'll show up if you go like, oh no, it just slides around.
Upper left corner.
The upper left, thanks, yeah, there's the school property, and then just to the right of that pad is the
Got it.
Mueller property. Oh, great.
If the battery works.
There
There
you
we
go.
go.
Good job, Pat.
Oh.
Was that my fault?
Oh, I hit one of the buttons on
You have
the,
more than one button.
apparently it's tied in. That's
So the blue area is an annexation that you recently recommended approval and the village board and town board approved, and that's really the Don Tierney lands that will develop on the west side of Q. We did annex in the intersection of Woodland Drive and Highway Q. And it appears that Dane County has already updated their maps, because I talked to Chief Plendle today, I saw there was an accident out there, and actually it was our guys that responded, and not Dane County Sheriff. And we think that's pretty important in terms of response time. We have an agreement in place that says that upon annexation of the school property, the Mueller property as well as the school property would be annexed into the village through a process. So I don't think there's any disagreement in terms of it's now, the timing could be right to bring both of those properties into the village. We did, and I put some maps out in front of your.
Oh, you're handing them out.
Oh, I'm handing them out. Oh, okay.
I don't want them to get lost.
Do you have those any chance?
I don't have those on here. I could probably get them up.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to have those in there.
Which one you want to start with existing?
Yeah, go to the existing first. I mean, that'll match what's in the.
Brian,
Yeah, that's similar to the map
give
that,
one of those to the people up there, they can see it.
it's similar to the map that you just, that's already been approved recently in the last couple of months. In discussions with our police department, and we had discussions with the town staff as well as Chris down there and Dean Grosgoff from the town about expanding more than just the Mueller property and the school property. So if you can go to the next one, Tracy.
I have to open it. Hang on.
So we're adding, so that's the blue down in the left-hand corner, that was the recent annexation. What we're proposing to add is what we really consider the baseball, soccer fields, Simon Crestway that goes through the, connecting the school to Woodland Drive. However, not annexing in Endress Manufacturing. They have no desire to annex into the village at this time. But annex in all of the road right-of-way along Century Avenue. There can be some confusion at times in terms of response time from the Waunakee Police versus the Sheriff's Department on what side of the road the accident occurred and who's responding. We've also had some issues up at the ball fields and Simon Crestway, and we think it would make, at the staff level, make sense to bring that all into the village to avoid any confusion, and certainly we're closer and more readily available during busy times. We don't want the Sheriff's Department, traveling far distances in order to drive fast in order to get here. I did get an email late today from Chief Plendle. He did have conversations with the Sheriff's Department about this issue. They're in agreement. I can pull it up, but they no opposition. In fact, they think it's, from a public safety standpoint, they think it's actually a good thing for bring these properties into the village. Economically, it should be somewhat neutral. I mean, the village will have a little more of a burden because it'll now maintain Simon Crestway, so we'll have to plow it. But actually, between our agreements, we're already plowing it. And we'll have to maintain it, so if the road deteriorates and it needs to be resurfaced, we'll be responsible for the Simon Crestway. And I think the town of Westport actually pays electricity on a couple of the lights that are along Simon Crestway. It shouldn't have any negative effect on Endress Manufacturing or the substation that's on the corner. Those can still, operate. And actually, it does create a town island because we have a boundary agreement that should not be an issue in terms of creating that town island. So I think what we'd like to do is talk about not only the Mueller property, which we know by agreement that we can start the annexation process, but we would like to get support to annex these additional properties as well into the village. So that would be the just at a concept level. We'll definitely talk about it at our planning commission, then we'll introduce it tomorrow at the joint planning commission. So with that, I'd like to get the feedback from the planning commission on this issue.
I'll give a little more background. I mean, this was before us when the Mueller property was first.
Developed and annexed, correct.
I think is it 9 or 11 or 13, I can't remember, acres of land approximately. And one of our debates at that time was, do we want to have one residence on that much right at our border, knowing we were going to probably end up expanding in that direction at some point. So Mr. Miller was agreeable for us when this time frame occurred. We have an agreement that states that he would willingly annex into the village. Correct me if I'm saying anything wrong.
Nope, you're right, and it looks like there's a CSM that's attached to the agreement. It looks like maybe it's 11.97 acres.
Okay,
And then we have a similar agreement with the school district that says the school district would come in. Basically, both of these properties would come in once a large portion of land adjacent to it was annexed, i.e. the Tierney annexation.
and one of the biggest drivers of this was Chief Plendel, actually. He requested for the roads as well as the school. There was a lot of confusion for not having our police presence in that school because it was now part of Westport. And then just being able to respond, who was responding, a lot of confusion there. Same thing with the roads. If you look at the entryway into the high school off of Q, part of the road going into it was, I believe, Westport, and then right at the fence went to Waunakee. So if there was an accident in the parking lot, who was going to respond? So there was just a lot of confusion within the police department, and I think he described it as nuts to me when we were going through. This is nuts. So we entered in discussions then with Westport at that point about these, and it made sense to them too, and I think it makes sense for both communities.
And I did get an email from Chief Plendel to that particular school issue as well, and he said, he met with Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Office has no opinion about the school being annexed into the village. However, until it is, they are gonna be the primary agency in the school district, and it's their responsibility, so they're gonna have a presence there. But they don't have an opinion either way, if it should or shouldn't be annexed into the village.
So naturally, I would assume with the school district, and just from a response time, they're gonna wanna have the Waunakee police there as opposed to.
We did also got an email from the superintendent at the school district that said he fully supported the annexation of the school property into the village.
So that's, all of this makes sense for what we're doing within our planning. So that's I mean, Kevin's looking for guidance for tomorrow.
Yeah, guidance, because you're gonna, a couple of you guys are gonna have to state the case tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely supportive. I think it makes all the sense in the world, the fact that the police department has to determine what side of the street is an accident versus, their response versus the county. I think that's a little crazy to think about, but yeah, I'm completely supportive.
Should we expect any pushback from Westport, or Dean's on board?
Dean was on board when we spoke. We just spoke last week, Friday.
You spoke about both parts?
And Endress is the heavy bold, right?
Yeah, the heavy red.
Heavy red, yeah, okay, got it.
That's really the only part there that concerns me is that island, but it is what it is.
Yeah, if they're not supportive, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Anybody else have any comments or concerns?
Is the only issue from a taxation standpoint, the Miller residence, is that really all that's
Yes.
property taxable on this whole deal? Okay.
Yes. Kip, do you want to explain how that works, the 5 years? That stays in Westport?
With the 5-year
I can.
payback,
Or
yeah.
do you want to?
To annex the land, typically what we do, if we have a developer, the developer is gonna make the payments. Here, since we don't have a developer, what we're gonna do is basically whatever taxes, assuming the annexation is approved, whatever the taxes are for, it's either last year or this year that were paid to the town, the village is gonna have to pay those for a 5-year period. So they don't change at all, they remain the same, but it's a 5-year period where we would have to make those payments.
Does his tax rate change?
Yeah,
Yes, well, yeah.
he's gonna be in the village, so I don't know what the change is, but there will be a change.
And he also had to
After
agree.
the 5-year period.
No, they're two entirely separate things. Like the payment that we have to make under the statutes, that's a fixed amount that we have to make every 5 years for the next 5 years. His taxes, or the property owner's taxes would change I'd need to talk to Julie exactly how this works, the fact that the property owner would be coming into the village. My gut tells me that, I mean, you're assessed based on January, so I think maybe that the payment's still made to the town, and it would be effective January 1st, 2019, that things would really change for the property owner.
Thank you.
And part of the agreement also is that he agreed to pay for all hookups and anything we use for his land.
That is, there is an agreement to that effect. It's a separate agreement, I believe, but there is language in there that, my understanding is that property is currently under private water and private sewer. And there's about 3 different contingencies that if they happen, then they would agree to hook up and pay for it, yes.
And they also agreed to cooperate for any easements or access that we needed to get for the property, to get the utilities through there if it makes sense.
Okay, is everybody good with
Makes sense.
the recommendations?
Okay, there's a second part to this one, since we're cleaning up, here's the one, hand these out. And it's Highway 19 out by Culver's. It's not clear because we think the 911 center has different maps than what we officially have. Half the road may show, and it's one of these deals where it might show half in, we're showing it none of the road right away in the village, and the 911 center, I think, shows half of it being in the village. And if you go to the proposed, we're proposing to bring in the Schumacher-Ramish Road Highway 19 intersection. Again, same with response time and any confusion, and it's happened recently in the last week, is that we're in a better position to respond. And remember, EMS is regardless. We have the same EMS if it's in the town or the village, but there are times when our officers are in a better position to respond. And they cooperate, the sheriff's department and ours, and so if they're not in a position to respond quickly anyway, they always call for assistance. It's a pretty common thing. So if we do have access to the road, it does give us a lot of leeway in terms of being able to respond to any accidents or incidents on the whole right-of-way. So for instance, if there's, I don't think the town necessarily wants to give up the right-of-way by the Schumacher Farm, which we don't think is problematic. It's because that's not where we're having the issues. It's really at the intersection we're having the issues. But if there's, if we at least have half the roadway in the village, and if there's a speeder or a drunk driver on the other half of the roadway, state statute allows them to actually take control of the entire roadway in terms of writing citations or taking action. And I think Chris talked to Dean with this one as well. This was part of our conversation back in February. There's no tax implications. There's actually, it's being maintained by the state, so it's actually not, we're not taking any more responsibility in terms of maintenance. We are taking some more responsibility in terms of responding to accidents and whatever goes along with that. But in terms of public safety, this is the one the police chief is advocating for.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
Everybody okay, good with it?
What does this do to our ability to control speed limits, anything of that nature?
Nothing, because it's a state highway.
Still, okay.
It's still under all their jurisdiction.
Just out of curiosity, what would our response time be versus the sheriff if nothing changed? Just generally speaking.
Yeah, I didn't ask that question, so I
2 minutes versus 10?
it depends on where the sheriff, they have somebody, Dane County Sheriff has somebody out here patrolling, so it just depends if, how close
That'd
they
be a
happen
pretty
to be.
big delta, I would think.
On average?
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah.
Okay. Pat, good?
Looks great.
Chris? Good. Okay. Next, we've got our Waunakee Westport Plan Commission items for action. Discuss and take action on certified survey map and rezone Kelcher 5511 Easy Street, Town of Westport. Kevin? Anything?
Yeah, I'll look at JC.
While you're searching, my daughter just texted me, I'll share this with everybody, that tropical storm Chris has turned to hurricane.
Hurricane Chris.
So, must be referring to you, Chris.
What are you looking for, Kevin?
What's that?
What are you looking for?
Kelchers, this is the one that we didn't take any action on, so they're gonna come back
Right.
with some modified plans.
Do we even
Yeah.
need to, we don't really need to do
We
anything right
don't,
now.
we don't need to do anything. It's, in fact, we even had a public hearing, I think, at the board level. The joint planning, Westport really had some concerns yet, and they were trying to satisfy some of those concerns. Really doesn't have an impact on the village. So, we typically would defer to them. They had signed an agreement saying no further development, so I think they're trying to work through that issue in terms of will they allow some further development on this land or not. In terms of long-term development, this is well over 30 years out in terms of we ever developed out in that direction. And it probably will never make sense in terms of getting our utilities out that far.
So it's asking us to take action, we don't really need to do any
We
action.
don't need to
do we?
take any action.
So, okay. Okay. Any other comments about that?
Negative.
All right, initial consultation, request to rezone from County R1 to Village R1 to construct shed, Walner 4496 Gilkison Road in the town of Westport.
Yeah, unless you care about sheds in the town, you probably don't have much to weigh in on. There's just some height restrictions, some really quirky height restrictions that the county has in their zoning code. And so if they rezone it to the Village R1, which is allowed because they're in our zoning jurisdiction, it allows them to build a more reasonable size shed.
Can you define that a little more for us, please? What is reasonable size shed?
Looks like they want to build a 30 by 40 by 12, and that's 2 feet higher than they can under county. So 2 extra foot tall shed is what they want to build.
It's Westport, so
Shed.
I'm not gonna stop them from doing that if they want to, or I don't feel the need to.
It's not 35 feet.
No. Does anybody else have any for our joint plan members? Okay.
It's at 30.
Next, we've got conceptual discussion, annexation, okay, which we already talked about, Mueller and school district properties.
And then we're gonna introduce the other two issues, right, to clean them up.
Yes,
Talk
yeah,
about those.
yeah, we'll add those in.
Okay.
Just a reminder that we're gonna, the village board is gonna be hearing a presentation on July 16th. And what it is, and under your direction, we're gonna undertake a housing study. And so there'll be somebody here from UW Extension who's scoped out what they're proposing to do, and they'll make that presentation to the village board. We think it'd be really helpful to have the planning commission members there if you're available.
That's Monday. the
Monday,
16th.
July 16th.
Okay, one other motion then.
Make a motion to adjourn.
By Tim Black to adjourn,
Second.
second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everybody.
Kevin, what time on the 16th?